Let me introduce our first speaker, who is Emmanuelle Legrand. She is a judge, but a magistrate détachée, chargée de mission, and she's at the Ministry of the Economy, Finance, and Industrial and, I suppose, Digital Sovereignty.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm sorry, my title was like both in French and English, so I apologize. I'm an AI manager in the Ministry of Economy. So if to make it simple, hello everyone. Thank you very much for being here, and thank you to the Franco-British Data Society and the French Embassy for inviting me. I will try to give you a very short and broad overview on what's going on in the EU on AI, meaning on the AI Act that's being negotiated between the member states. And of course, I will not be able to talk about everything, but I will be happy to get your questions afterwards, and hopefully it will give you an overview on how this might impact your sector. So I wanted to start with a general presentation of the AI Act in very general terms, and then I will focus afterwards a bit more on actually the financial sector, since we're here to talk about it. On the general side, I would start by reminding you that actually the way that the EU has decided to approach this very complicated topic is through a regulatory and mandatory framework, which is what we are negotiating right now among member states for reasons of liability and for reasons of sharing fairly responsibilities among the value chain of AI. So basically, if you read text, you will find a lot of rules, but you will also find mechanisms for monitoring, governance, and also some kind of a whole chapter on sanctions and penalties. So this is the first point. Sorry, I wanted to mention is it's not an optional or recommendation. It's actually going to be mandatory for several actors. But at the same time, the EU was well aware that this framework will need to be flexible in different ways. First way is in time, because it has to be future-proof. Considering the technology, the evolution of the technologies, of course, which is why we also we've had a lot of discussions on first point on the definition of AI, because I'm sure that if we ask 10 of us here tonight, we might not have the same definition of AI exactly. So it has to be flexible in time, but it also has to be flexible for the different sectors, because this is a horizontal approach, which means that it will apply to the financial sector, but also to law enforcement, to the justice sector, to the industry or startups doing digital. So that was actually the main challenge, is to find the rules that are common enough, but flexible enough to actually be useful for everyone. So basically, I would summarize this first point by saying that the objective through the negotiations has been to try to have a text that at the same time is horizontal, so which lays down harmonized rules in the EU for reasons of legal certainty, of course, while being compatible with specific legislations that are already in place. And by the way, does not repeal any specific legislation, any sectoral legislations, they are still there. And also this text has to be flexible in the future. It has to be future-proof. So that was the first point that I wanted to tell you about the general approach that was taken by the European Commission when they presented this text. And this text, by the way, was published by the European Commission as a proposal in April 2021. So we've been over 18 months of negotiations between member states. The second point I wanted to mention is actually to give you a little bit more clarity on this, is the scope and the focus of this act. So of course, I'm not going to talk of what it will be like in the future, because as some of you might know, it's not finalized yet. We still have to find an agreement between member states, and also afterwards we will start negotiations with the European Parliament. But as a general matter, I think it's always very important to remind people that it is a product legislation. So I would like to clarify that this is not a data protection legislation, for instance, and or any kind of other legislation. This is a product legislation, which means that the approach that has been chosen in its drafting is also very specific to other legislation on products in the EU. And sometimes I realize, because I've been through 6 months of the French presidency in the EU Council also this year, it's been really tense also because we've talked to a lot of stakeholders, and we've also identified some misunderstandings and some different meanings according to which we would talk to, and people would not necessarily read the text the same way. So that's obviously an issue that we've tried to address in the Council between member states, and that we will try to continue to focus on. So that being said, if it's a product legislation, when you read the text, you will realize that it focuses not on AI in general, but on AI systems. And more particularly on AI systems placed on the market or put into service. So that's the framing, the phrasing that we use in the text, which means that we are looking at the products before, at the systems before they're placed on the EU market. And it means also, the first point I wanted to make is that we're looking at systems. So it means whether you're a provider in the EU or outside the EU, as long as you intend to place an AI system on the EU market, you will have to comply with some of the rules of the regulation. So the first point is the focus on AI systems. The second point about the scope and the focus is that we have a common objective of a fair share of responsibilities. So it means that, and it might not be obvious for everyone, but a lot of rules are actually on providers, and very specific rules are on users of those systems, which means that if you develop or have a system developed for you, you are the provider. But if you just buy the system and use it in your institution or a company, then you are only a user, and you might not actually be the one to make sure that you comply with your system complies with the regulation. So it means that we have different rules, different technical requirements, but also different rules on different actors. So mainly the providers, also some rules for the users, and also for providers that are not in the EU, some adjustments and specific rules for distributors, importers, and authorized representatives of those non-EU companies. So the purpose is, I mean, the general idea was to say, if we want an efficient regulation, we need an efficient implementation. So that was the focus that was taken. And the third point about the focus is that it is a risk-based approach. So it focuses mainly on high-risk AI systems or prohibited AI systems. So basically, most of the rules are not for all AI systems in general. Most of the rules will be mandatory only for high-risk AI systems. And I will not have time to talk about another issue, but one of the issue in negotiations is what we call general purpose AI, which are now in the text without violating any secrets. It's been a very difficult topic, but I wanted to mention it. So this is the general framework that we've been working on. And so what does it mean concretely for the financial sector? First of all, as I said, it's a horizontal approach. So it means that this financial sector will be included. And as I explained, it's not only for EU providers. So if you are a provider outside the EU or in the UK, and then you want to place an AI system on the EU market, you will have to be aware of this regulation. But at the same time, specificities of the financial sectors have been taken into account, first by the Commission, by the European Commission, and then by member states in the negotiations, which is why also we talked to the European Central Bank, and we also talked to the different stakeholders to really understand how the system is organized that is in the financial sector. And if you read through the text, you will see that in a lot of articles, there's a specific reference to actually financial institutions. So the objective is what? The objective is not to repeal the sectoral legislation, in particular financial legislation. The objective is to add a new layer that was not taken into account in the specific legislations in particular before, which is AI. And it does not repeal the existing laws, so it does not create any new procedures, and it does not create new obligations except those that are linked to AI in particular in the AI regulation. So, which means that, for instance, if we're talking about an ex post control procedure in the financial institution, this will remain an ex post control. So there will be no change, except that in the criteria that the authorities will have to look at, they will have to include some of the specifics of the AI Act. And I just wanted to finish by just summarizing what I see as real changes in practice in the financial sector. So first of all, as I already said, if you're a provider, no matter where you are in the EU or not, then you will have to be aware of this. Second of all, I would say that most of the rules, I mean, we have to remember that most of the rules of the AI Act will be applicable in only several under several conditions. So first of all, you have to use, either you want to place on the market or use a system that is clearly prohibited in the EU by the AI Act. We can get into details later, or then you will not be able to, of course. But if you will have to follow the rules, most of the rules, only if your system qualifies as a high-risk AI system. And actually, conditions are specific to be high-risk system. So if you're not a high-risk AI system, then you will not go through most of the text. So just to mention a couple of worries that we can talk about later, it's about conformity assessment. There are actually rules, but also nothing is really changing except that we are integrating the specifics of AI in the existing procedures in the financial sectors. And at the end of the day, the text also contains some presumptions to help financial institutions get ready to apply the AI Act in the existing procedure. So actually, I wanted to stop that, so I'm going to do my 3 minutes. I will just finish by telling you that the text is not voted yet. We are heading toward a common agreement among member states, between member states and the European Council. And then after that, hopefully we will start negotiating with the European Parliament in the first part of next year. And I will stop here. I don't know if you have any questions. No questions.
Yes, maybe. Thanks, Emmanuelle, for this well, very interesting summary of the regulation and the discussion ongoing. We know a critical topic on this text has been the definition of AI. Can you give us an highlight on this? Because it's can either be technical or be too philosophical. So where do we stand as of today in the definition of AI that is written for the text?
Without betraying any secrets, I can tell you that there was some probably some consensus, a relative consensus among member states to make the definitions clearer than what they were in the first initial draft by the Commission. That was too wide for a lot of people. So there's still work on it, so I can't really get into more specific details at the moment, but the tendency is actually to make it more readable in the sense of a narrower definition and closer to the definition of the OECD, just to give you a reference.
Okay, thanks for that.
Thanks for that, Manny. I've just got a quick question. It might get covered later, but do you think that for the applicable systems that this legislation will cover the accountability gap?
I'm not sure I understand your question, but the purpose of the AI Act is actually to be a layer that completes the existing EU and national legislation. So it doesn't replace rules, but indeed the purpose is to fill up the gaps. Because all the existing procedures, and for instance, in particular in the financial sector, we are aware that the controls are more on prudential focus. So basically, it would just mean that we add the specificities and the specific concerns about AI on top of what we already do, but it would not replace everything. So I don't know if I answer your question.
Thanks. I just wonder if it goes way to address things like if you used an AI system and it makes decisions and it made a wrong decision, or it made a decision that negatively impacted some people, would it be clear from that particular legislation who's accountable for it, as in the person that bought it used the coders, the manufacturers? Just wonder if it goes way to address that.
Emmanuelle, would you be kind to be very brief, because we're now to the next person. But thank you.
Yes, there is no liability regime in this act. And there is also actually a new text that's been published by the European Commission. It's a directive proposal on civil liability on AI, which actually will complete the AI regulation. There is a couple of articles on liability when providers are outside the EU, but the aim of the text is actually not to address the liability per se, because we consider at the moment that existing rules are enough.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Emmanuelle, for a really crystal clear, well structured, and if I may say so, informative speech. So thank you very much. That brings us to Jason Bradley, who's the Project Director and Chair, Technology and Digital Steering Group at the Financial Reporting Council. Jason, if you would like to show yourself, unmute yourself. Oh, there you are. So over to you.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you everyone for coming along today. I thought it would be nice to start my little section. I'll try to speak maybe for 10-12 minutes and then leave a little time for questions, really by picking up Emmanuelle's thread from the EU AI Act to think about what we're looking at from a UK perspective. So the UK government issued their consultation on AI regulation in the UK, which closed in September just past. And so we're waiting at the moment for the government white paper, which will kind of summarize the consultation responses and look at next steps. It's really interesting because obviously, as Emmanuelle pointed out, the EU Act has extraterritorial impacts for people that are looking to provide AI solutions in Europe. In the EU, sorry, but in the UK, we really needed to think about what our own regulatory regime looked like. So the proposals from the government as it stands at the moment are going to be, from what it looks like, although obviously we're still waiting for final paper, far less kind of rules oriented. And the idea is that what will happen is that the AI space in the UK will focus on kind of cross-sectoral principles. The aim at the moment is for there to be 6 of them. And what will happen is that responsibility for ensuring that people actually follow those will be taken on by each of the regulators for the space. So the FRC in the UK are the regulator for auditors, as well as accountancy and looking also actuarial work. So it'll be our responsibility to look at those principles and how they are abided by those that we regulate. The proposal looks like what it will encourage is a lighter touch approach. So it'll think a little bit more about guidance and voluntary measures and things like creating sandboxes before AI is introduced into the wider market. we are in fact launching an audit sandbox at the FRC, which isn't exclusively focused on AI. It's going to look at other areas of innovation as well. But certainly projects around AI and machine learning are something that are likely to be considered within that sandbox environment. So there are some similarities, but there are also some differences, I think, where we'll end up from a UK perspective in terms of regulation and AI conceptually. I think it would also then be nice, I thought, to talk a little bit about more on the audit side than the other two sides, but why are we as the FRC so interested in AI and machine learning? And I thought it would be nice to talk through a few of the kind of key challenges that we've come across as a regulator. Thinking about why we're so interested in it, it's interesting to look at audit quality. If you look at audit quality trends over the years, there have been some improvements over audit quality. In audit quality, when we look at our audit quality review team's reports, we look at findings, we look at enforcement, and we look at supervision, there have been improvements in audit quality, but there is still a substantial proportion of audits where the quality is perhaps not what it should be. And so what we really need to think about as a regulator, one of our strategic principles going forwards for the next 2023 to 25 period is to think about innovation is, well, where is there potential for innovation to help with audit quality? Technology and innovation is something that's always at the forefront of discussions at the moment with us and regulators, other standard setters and practitioners. And AI and machine learning tools are definitely things that have some really interesting potential from a quality perspective. So that's why we're interested in AI and machine learning as a regulator, not just on the side of saying, well, we need to make sure that AI is used safely and that it's technically secure and that it's deployed in an ethical fashion, because of course those things all need to happen. But we're also really interested in where the potential benefit is in AI from a regulatory perspective. To give an example, we're working on some guidance at the moment which looks at how an auditor might consider using an AI tool in the context of a live audit. The reason that we're looking at that is from a standards perspective, so looking at auditing standards, there isn't anything that prevents an auditor from using AI. There are some challenges, and I'm glad you mentioned it, Graham, around things like responsibility, which are potentially complex and need thinking about a little bit more. But there's nothing that stops an auditor using an AI tool in order to help them risk assess or to gather evidence. But the standards also don't say you have to. So we're in that interesting space where the standards that we produce don't tell people to do something, but they also don't tell them not to. And so what we're working on is some guidance that hopefully will help auditors if they are looking at deploying an AI or a machine learning tool. They think there's a really good quality benefit to it. They think that the governance they've had around that tool is really strong, that actually there are some ways that you could think about how you can get over those documentation and responsibility hurdles. So that's where we're so interested really in that space and thinking about how quality can kind of be improved by utilizing these tools and thinking about how they come together. With that in mind, one thing we've tried to set out is what is our approach then to regulating AI, machine learning tools, but also tools like data analytics processes and technology more generally. So we tried to come up with kind of 4 core principles. The first is that anything that we do in the technology and AI space is always principles oriented. So ultimately the standards that we set are principles based. We have specific rules and specific requirements, but they usually orient around principles. So our guidance is more likely to come out in a guidance format than it is in a change to a standard. The reason for that is, although many firms in the UK use all kinds of different technology and lots of them are starting to look at machine learning tools, we also have quite a lot of audit firms that don't use particularly sophisticated technological resources. So we need to make sure that our standards remain technologically agnostic, but that we as a regulator can respond to things like AI. Hence why that lighter touch option that's discussed in the government's proposals for AI regulation in the UK are likely aligning with something that we already do at the FRC, which is to think about technology as something that really needs to build on a set of principles. The other big thing is that we're quality focused, is that anything that we look at when we're looking at firms and the tools that they're using to get to a sensible place in their audits is the focus on quality. There are lots of potentially interesting tools, but our interesting question is, well, how has that led to a better result? And obviously there's a little bit of a sort of question that we have with the firms where they say, well, we think about efficiency because we want to get the audit done more quickly, or we want it to be more profitable, which obviously is understandable. If you're a commercial entity providing a service on commercial terms, you're looking for it to be profitable. But we're also thinking about it more from a quality aspect. So one of the things we do with, for example, having external working groups is trying to think about how we can understand the practical day-to-day use of these kinds of tools and balance that with a quality focus. In order to do that, our third principle is that anything we do in this space from an AI perspective is always going to be outreach led, which is we are always thinking about talking to other standard setters, academics, people that are doing this stuff on a day-to-day basis. And that's very important because ultimately the FRC is the regulator for audit. We're not AI or machine learning experts. Some of us have got a reasonable amount of knowledge and we know what we need to know in order to be able to function as a regulator, but we're not the experts when it comes to, how tools are developed, for example. So one case study in that is that we have some good links with the Turing Institute here in the UK, where what we really try to do is make sure that if we're looking at guidance around AI or machine learning, that as well as it working in the context of audit, it works in the context of the AI and machine learning spaces themselves, because the guidance has to be credible, we think, in both spaces. It has to make sense to auditors, and it also has to make sense to the people that are looking to develop those tools. The fourth and kind of final principle is that our guidance and an approach to regulation of technology is proportionate. There are lots of different potential applications of AI and machine learning and all kinds of other tools. We can't respond to all of them, and we can't necessarily have a view on every single area. So that's where we have to be proportionate and think about where we can direct our regulatory resource to areas that are most important. So what can we focus on that is the most important thing for us to do as a regulator when it comes to the use of AI by auditors? And that kind of brings me neatly on, I think, to the next bit I wanted to talk about is, well, what do we think the challenges actually are from an AI perspective when it comes to using these tools in audit? The first, as I mentioned, something that Graham touched on, is thinking about documentation and responsibility, which is if you have used an AI tool as an auditor to help you conclude on a balance or to help you get your sufficient and appropriate audit evidence to conclude finally that you think the financial statements are true and fair. If you've used that tool to help you make that choice, who is responsible for that decision? One of the benefits of the audit standards is that there is one person, the engagement partner, who signs the audit report at the end. So if you were looking for a very direct, easy answer, from an audit perspective, who's responsible for the decisions that have been taken, irrespective of whether AI has been used to help make those choices or not, is always going to be the engagement partner. So there is some distinction, I think, between audit as a professional service and some others, where because of the nature of audit in the UK and how it becomes an individual that signs that engagement, that audit report at the end, it makes it a little bit easier to understand the responsibility. But that's probably not the simplest and cleanest answer, because we might say, fine, an engagement partner is the one who's ultimately responsible for looking at all of the evidence that's been gained in an audit. If an AI tool's been used to help generate that evidence or to help make judgments, that is also within that engagement partner's responsibility. However, is it reasonable for us as an audit regulator to expect every engagement partner who's used an AI tool to come to some kind of conclusion to be able to understand exactly what the algorithm's done? Are we expecting everyone to be an AI specialist as well as an engagement partner? And I think the obvious answer to that is no. So how do we get happy then with people taking responsibility for decisions when AI has been used if then themselves are not an expert? And we think, and the more we look at this and the more we talk about it, that the answer to that is probably governance. That if the engagement partner can't understand and explain the minutiae of how an AI tool has done what it's done or helped make a choice, if the engagement partner can't, somebody at the audit firm should. And really, it's what we're starting to term a kind of hierarchy of understanding. So that really was the biggest question. So an engagement partner themselves probably isn't going to be an AI expert, but somebody at an audit firm should. It's about having an hierarchy of understanding. And we think that the key really is governance. So when you're thinking about using an AI tool, in this instance in audit, but I think the principle works more widely really for any kind of professional service. It's about how that tool got to where it got to on a day-to-day basis. So how was it trained? How was it tested? How did the firm get happy that they could use it? And we're kind of lucky in audit because, in a sense, the firms often already have those governance processes in place. When they deploy non-AI based data analytics tools, or even things like sampling methodologies, there is a vast kind of governance process with layers of sign-off and hierarchy that a lot of people are saying, well, actually, that's probably going to work from an AI perspective as well. So when we're looking at using these tools in audit, we often have an existing framework within the firms to help them with that governance process. They were the kind of main things that I wanted to touch on. I also wanted to leave enough time if there's any questions, if anybody has any. So yeah, I'll hand it back over to yourself, Michael.
Thank you very much. I think that is the 15 minutes. So
okay.
Unless we bite unfairly into people coming after, I think I would thank you very much again for another very clear and enlightening discussion, and turn to Julien Molez, who's at the Group Data and AI Innovation Leader at Société Générale. Over to you, Julien.
Well, thank you, Michael, and thank you all for having me today, and be able to speak in front of you and share our experience within Société Générale on the use of AI and analytics in our digital transformation. And I think it will echo to what previous speakers shared, because it's definitely a key topics, both from a regulation perspective, how do we make sure we make a sound use of AI regards to the citizen and the user of financial services, but also how can we use them to provide better services and to use it in a digital transformation of the bank. So just a quick reminder, but Société Générale is a major financial services player, having businesses in retail banking, but also wholesale banking and different financial services in 60 different countries. So with more than 120,000 employees, so very large organization. And I try to share with you the use we do today of AI to transform the way the group operates in its different businesses, and maybe share also a few examples, concrete examples of AI to be able to comply in different regulation, because it's quite interesting to talk about AI regulation, which we've been doing for a few minutes now, but also how can AI be used to answer regulatory needs. But maybe let's take a step back and see why do we use AI in our transformation and digital transformation? Because today it is definitely a key part, but we must keep in mind, because we hear a lot of noise about AI today, but algorithms and models have already been at the heart of financial services for decades now. So we are already used to taking decision by using modelized scenario based on past data. So now machine learning algorithms are bringing something new, something more powerful, especially in the analysis of language. But it's always interesting to keep in mind that it's been there for years. So to especially say what's so different with AI and what's so powerful, and what's the difference with traditional models, just like linear regression, or with standard algorithm based on complex rules. always interesting to make sure what we regulate is really the key things. So when it comes to using AI in digital transformation of a financial services firm like Société Générale, the first key driver why we've put that focus on AI is really first thing to remain competitive in the face of a competitive landscape that's evolving with the entrance of fintechs and big techs that massively leverage this kind of technology to bring better services, that is more personalized services to customers, but also more reactive experience and better cost income performance in the way they deliver business. So one of our challenge when we wanted to push the use of AI in our digital transformation was really to make our different business stakeholder within the structure to understand what was the potential value of that technology, which is obviously quite difficult to understand for them, to see how could it be applied to the way they process their business every day, and what's so different between AI, or most of the time, 99% of the time, machine learning for us, versus traditional algorithm, and what additional value it can bring to the client or to our different stakeholders. So a lot of time spent on explaining the technology, and it's now bearing fruits, because maybe to give you a quick snapshot of where we stand today, what the use of machine learning in transforming our different processes is already a reality in almost most of our value chains. So today we have a common framework within Société Générale to measure the adoption of analytics and AI in our transformation, because we ask every business to declare and report the use cases they have in their transformation, so we can have a common registry of all these use cases. Each of these use cases are assessed on the value they produce. So which is the expected value generation in million euro that we expect from that use case, and which is the main driver that is supposed to address. And among these drivers, we have 4 different ones. That could be operational efficiency, risk management, client experience, or business development, because those are the main 4 drivers that we use AI for. And as of today, to give you a quick snapshot, we have more than 1,000 use cases on AI and analytics being declared, with more than 300 use cases leveraging AI. So it's already a reality, and the expected value generation by end of 2022 is around 350 million euro on our operational results. So, well, that's a basic thing, and we have more than 300 data experts, that is data scientists leveraging AI spread across our organization. Maybe to make it briefly and to leave enough time to our last speaker, I'll share with you 4 examples, of AI, the use of AI in our transformation to address regulatory needs. The first one I'd like to share with you is, for example, in capital markets, we have the need to monitor a different conversation to monitor potential market abuse in the conversation of our different trading teams. We used to perform that duty with samples analysis of conversation in the past, and the use of AI, that is the capability to transcode any audio conversation or any email conversation or chat conversation into a data point, and to analyze, thanks to NLP technologies, the meaning of this conversation, make it possible now to analyze terabytes of data in real time, and to make that surveillance of capital market conversation almost in real time, while before real time and in the full scope of conversation, while before it was only a simple approach made once a year. So the use of AI and real-time analysis of conversation make that surveillance of market abuse much faster and more accurate. Another area where we use a lot, once again, of AI for NLP, for natural language processing, is all around KYC, onboarding, and periodic review, where we use AI to automatically analyze the different documents provided by our clients to make sure that we have a proper KYC filing. So it's being used for remediation on already millions of clients in the retail bank in France to automate the check of documents and to lower the time of filing KYC filing analysis from 1 hour to only a few minutes because of the review of the files and the pieces provided by the client has been massively reduced. Maybe a last example I'd like to share with you where AI is very powerful too is in our anti-money laundering processes and also sanction and embargoes review, where we know that scenario-based tools generate a lot of false alerts that have to be reviewed by a different compliance team, then losing a lot of time in investigation. And AI, by its capability to manage many different variables and features in the algorithm, makes it possible to reduce by at least 30 to 35% the rate of false alerts and to only focus our investigation time on the most problematic ones. So it makes that AML and sanction and embargoes processes much more efficient. It's only the few examples that I wanted to share with you in the use of AI in our different compliance duties.
Thank you. And now may I introduce Graham Thomson, who is the Chief Information Security Officer at Irwin Mitchell, who are a firm of city solicitors who have a particular interest in Franco-British matters. So Graham.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm just going to talk a little bit about how I've used AI to solve some diverse business challenges in the business. And although we're a law firm, we're also regulated by the Financial Services, Financial Conduct Authority. We do have some financial-based businesses. So, firstly, what do I mean by AI? And I'll keep it really simple and pragmatic because it is a hard question to answer. You take it into its two parts. Artificial is pretty easy to define, something made or produced that doesn't occur in nature, a copy of something natural. But the word intelligence, that's much harder to define, and it can mean many different things. So the original inventor of the term AI and one of the founders of the discipline, John McCarthy, said there's not yet a solid definition of intelligence that doesn't depend on relating it to human intelligence. So it's very easy when talking about AI to have that sort of bias and think it's mimicking in some way human activity, human intelligence. But despite this challenge, basically I describe it as a group of algorithms that can modify and create new algorithms in response to learned inputs, as opposed to just following out some basic tasks. So, at the moment, we're not talking about sentient conscious machines. We're talking about software programs that solve problems. So here's some of the problems that I've used it to solve. First and foremost, there's cybersecurity. So in the face of, the ever-evolving threats, you've got to maintain a good cybersecurity program. The cybercrime economy has mushroomed, costing £4.5 trillion last year and predicted to double by 2025. And sophisticated attacks are really hard to detect, and the average time taken to identify them is 287 days. So that's a lot of damage that can be caused in that time period, a lot of intellectual property that can disappear. There's lots of different cyber threats. One of the top ones is password brute forcing. There was a US online betting company that lost $300,000 in stolen customer funds, just reported yesterday for that breach. You've got your phishing emails that a lot of money can be stolen from the fake CEO, fake CFO emails. And of course, everyone will have heard of ransomware and the threats from that, big operational impact. So how do you tackle all of it? Well, we use a combination of people, process and technology. But using good security-related data is at the heart of any cybersecurity program, particularly the secure and ethical use of data for decision-making. But you think about the size of it, all the computers that are used, all the websites that are run, the IT infrastructure, Internet of Things, all the data points, it's just massive. Add to that the speed at which cyber threat adapts and evolves. It's just a mammoth task. It can't be done by humans alone anymore. So this is where AI and machine learning really comes into its own. It's just perfect for analyzing huge sets of data at lightning speed. So from finding new malware to identifying risky end user behavior to spotting potential phishing emails, it does all that. It can also automate tasks, so turning threat detection into defensive reactions very quickly, stopping issues from becoming incidents. And industry research shows that from previous breaches that organizations that have automation via AI experience 80% lower breach costs if they were breached than organizations without it. So one of our systems uses AI. It reaches across all computers, cloud services. It sees end user actions such as remote logins and lots of other activity. And it collects and correlates this, applying threat intelligence models. And it can see patterns, behaviors from billions of logs that you just wouldn't be able to do without it. And then it can take action automatically. So rather than just telling you there's a problem, it can actually do something about it. I mean, this saves so much time and resources, allowing the people in the team to focus on other things. So although AI has revolutionized the cybersecurity industry, and in my view, we're sort of way ahead of some other business areas in its use, some people worry that the spread of AI tools will result in job losses as it replaces humans with cheaper, better automated tools. But given that AI has been in the cybersecurity community for some years now, all I see is more and more cybersecurity jobs, and in fact more jobs than there is people to fill them globally. So in that space, I'm not worried about AI taking over. In fact, I think it opens up even more opportunities. Another related area that we use AI in is data protection. So data being emailed to the wrong recipient is the highest non-cyber breach type reported to our information commissioner. It's so easy to do, isn't it? You open an email, you start typing a name, it suggests a name for you, you click yes, and send an email. Well, it might have gone to you might have selected the wrong person without really noticing. But how would a system know whether you're emailing the right person or not? Well, the AI tool, it looks at what normal behavior is. So it builds up a profile of your behavior with email, who you email, what kind of data you email to individuals. So then when you do try and send an email, and it's perhaps to someone you wouldn't normally send that email to, it warns you. You get a second chance to prevent a data breach. And the same system looks at risky email behavior in general. So for example, sending sensitive documents to personal email addresses, and risky behaviors are then alerted to the security team, who can follow up and potentially save other types of data loss. It also looks at the risk of an incoming email, if it might be malicious or potentially a phishing email. So these are things that a human can look at and check a few things, but people tend to be pretty bad at doing that, and the AI system is much better. So another area is separate to security is in data analytics, and it was mentioned earlier about using different models for that. So I used to look after the data science and analytic team, and we worked with university students from our data science faculty on some AI and machine learning models. So this was purely about business insights that would have been incredibly difficult to do using traditional statistical and analytical methods. So, for example, resourcing models that predict the fee earner time needed over a period for certain types of cases and certain types of business areas. Also, machine learning models to look at propensity, so predictive models that forecast behavior of target audiences by looking at past data. And that can help with things like identifying new services. that existing clients might be interested in. And again, as I mentioned earlier, linear regression models, but with machine learning to predict relationships from big data sets. And a use case, for example, is evaluating the impact of marketing campaigns on specific outcomes such as website visits or revenue. And finally, there's some other areas that we're working on. So for example, Microsoft Power Apps comes with built-in AI models like chatbots, image analysis, text analysis, such as sentiment analysis, crudely known as opinion mining. And now you don't need to be a coder, you don't need to be a statistician to be able to put some pretty clever business applications together. You just need an imagination and a bit of problem solving ability. So finally, the last thing that I think is going to be new for organizations, all of what I've talked about is about analytical AI, analyzing data, making some decisions. But what I'm seeing more and more of in the wider industry is AI for content creation. So such as text to images from user prompts, text to music, even videos these days. So the copyright aspects of this are really interesting, but basically it means that almost anyone now can be a graphic designer to a point. And that's going to be really interesting to see where that takes off to. So it's becoming so commonplace in technology, it's just easy to forget it's there. It's all over the place. And with that comes responsibility, and it was mentioned right at the start. So even at the minute, under GDPR, any new use of personal data needs a data protection impact assessment to be done. And you've got to do your due diligence. We have rejected AI tools that the business wanted because it maybe sent data outside the UK or the EU or didn't anonymize the data. So you really need to know your risks and what these technologies do. So when it comes to AI, it's undeniably useful, but you've got to be aware of the legal aspects, some of which are known, but a lot are just not yet decided, and particularly to fill the accountability gap, who effectively can be held to account if something goes wrong. So thank you for listening.
That allows me to thank everyone who's participated in this. And